I was 68 years old, kneeling in my mother's rose garden at dawn when I heard the engine rev next door. That black F-250, all chrome and meanness, backing out of the driveway. I knew what was coming before it happened. The way you know thunder's coming when you see lightning split the sky. Brett swung that truck wide, deliberate as a fist, and the tires chewed right through my mother's petunias. Purple and white, the ones she'd loved because they matched the dress she wore to my father's funeral. The flowers didn't stand a chance. He didn't break, didn't wave, just grinned through that tinted window and gave me a little salute, mocking, like I was some old fool who couldn't do a damn thing about it. My hands were shaking when I touched what was left. Broken stems, tire track mud, the smell of exhaust mixing with crushed petals. Across the street, I saw Dottie Chen's curtain twitch. The whole neighborhood had just watched me get stepped on. But that was only the beginning. I'd been up since 5:30, same as every morning for the past 40 years. Percolator on the stove, the same one Linda gave me back in '87 before everything went to hell. The coffee smell filled the kitchen while I stood at the window, watching the goldfinches work the feeder my mother had painted with sunflowers. She'd been dead 10 years, but her hands were all over this place. The garden especially, the roses were just starting to open. Heirlooms, the kind you can't buy at any garden center. Her mother brought the cuttings from Iowa in 1954, wrapped in wet newspaper. 3 generations of women had tended those roots. Now it was just me, an old man with arthritis, keeping a promise to ghosts. I took my coffee outside. The air smelled like dew and honeysuckle, and for a minute, the world felt right-sized, manageable. I had my trowel, the wooden handle worn smooth by my mother's hands. My hands, the weight of years between us. I was deadheading the roses when I heard it. That engine. Deep, aggressive, expensive. Brett's truck. I looked up just in time to see him backing out. Normal people, they'd swing onto the street, take the turn easy. Not Brett. He cranked that wheel hard, reversed right across the property line, and those big tires tore through the petunia bed like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. The flowers exploded under the weight, purple and white petals flying, stems snapping, black tire tracks gouging the earth. My mother had planted those petunias every spring since 1960. She'd say they reminded her of easier times when my father was still alive and the world made sense. Brett didn't slow down. He just shifted into drive, and through that tinted window I saw him grin. Then he raised one hand, casual, slow, and gave me a little salute, mocking, making sure I knew it wasn't an accident. Linda stood on their porch, coffee cup in hand. My ex-wife of 5 years, married to this man for 18 months. She watched the whole thing. Didn't call out, didn't frown, just stood there like it was a show she'd already seen. I knelt in the dirt. My knees cracked, they always do now, and I touched the broken stems. The soil was still damp from watering the night before. Crushed petals stuck to my fingers. The exhaust smell made my eyes water, or maybe that was something else. Across the street, Dottie Chen's curtain moved, then Mrs. Patterson's. By noon, the whole town would know. Old Frank Morrison got run over in his own yard, and he just knelt there and took it. I gathered up what I could save. Not much. The roots were torn, the soil churned. I'd have to replant the whole bed, and at my age, kneeling twice in one day meant my back would punish me for a week. Inside, I washed my hands. The dirt under my fingernails was dark, almost black. I scrubbed until the water ran clear, then stood at the sink staring out at the tire tracks. They cut through the garden like scars. I should have been angry. Should have marched over there and had it out with Brett, told him what I thought about men who destroy things just because they can, but I didn't. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with little blue flowers Linda had picked out years ago, still here after she'd taken everything else. And I figured maybe it was an accident. Maybe he didn't see. Maybe I was being an old fool, taking offense where none was meant. That's what I told myself anyway. That's what men like me do. We make excuses. We keep the peace. We figure one ruined flower bed isn't worth a fight, and besides, Linda had sounded almost sorry on the phone last Christmas when she'd called to ask about Kyle. Almost like the woman I'd married was still in there somewhere. I made another pot of coffee and sat on the porch. The morning had gone sour. The goldfinches didn't sound as cheerful anymore. The honeysuckle smelled too sweet, almost sickly. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, an accident. Brett was stressed. Linda had mentioned something about his business expanding, new construction projects. Men get distracted. It happens. I was replanting the petunias when Dottie came over. She's 72, Korean War vet's widow, sharp as a tack, even if her hands shake now. She stood at the property line, arms crossed, looking at the tire tracks. That was deliberate, Frank. Now Dottie. Don't now Dottie me. I watched him. He aimed for those flowers like he was targeting practice. I pressed soil around a salvaged root ball. Maybe he just wasn't paying attention. She made a sound in her throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite disgust. Harold used to say you were too forgiving for your own good. Some people, Frank, they see kindness and they think it's weakness. Harold, her husband. Dead 4 years now. He and I built these houses together back in the 60s, helped each other through the nightmares we both brought home from different wars. He'd know what to do. He always did. I'll talk to Linda, I said. She'll straighten him out. Dottie looked at me for a long moment, then shook her head. You do that. She walked back to her house, and I heard her screen door slam, the same sound my daughter used to make, running outside on summer mornings 30 years ago. I finished replanting as the sun dropped. My back ached. My knees felt like broken glass. But the bed looked decent again. Not perfect, but decent. You couldn't see the tire tracks anymore if you didn't know to look. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer. The bullfrog started up from the creek at the back of the property, and somewhere down the street, someone was grilling, charcoal smoke drifting through the humid air. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. But I kept looking at that petunia bed, and even in the dark I could feel where those tires had been. Like a bruise you can't see but can't stop touching. I pulled out my phone, the smartphone Kyle had given me last birthday, shown me how to use even though my thick fingers kept hitting the wrong buttons. I found Linda's number, stared at it. 5 years divorced, and calling her still felt like reaching for something that might burn. But I hit the button anyway. She answered on the third ring. Frank? Surprised, maybe annoyed. Hard to tell anymore. Hey, Linda. Sorry to bother you. A pause, then, what do you need? What I need. Like I was asking for a loan, not just basic decency from the man she'd chosen over me. Brett drove through my petunias this morning, the ones Mom used to plant. I was wondering if maybe you could ask him to be more careful backing out. Silence on the line. Long enough that I thought maybe we'd been disconnected. Linda? He's stressed, Frank. The business is expanding. New contracts. He's got a lot on his mind. I'm sure he does. I'll talk to him. And just like that, I heard it. The woman I'd married. Reasonable. Kind. Almost. Like we were neighbors again, instead of strangers who'd shared a bed for 36 years. Thank you, I said. How are you? She asked, and the question caught me off guard. I saw Kyle posted photos from his graduation. You look good. We talked for 5 more minutes. Small things. Weather. The church potluck. Whether the Johnsons were really moving to Florida. It felt normal. It felt like maybe some things could be fixed with just a conversation. Just 2 adults being civil. When I hung up, I felt lighter. Problem solved. Crisis averted. Just a misunderstanding between neighbors, nothing that couldn't be smoothed over. I finished my beer and went inside. Brushed my teeth at the bathroom sink, saw my face in the mirror, 68 years looking back, more gray than I remembered, more lines around the eyes. But still here, still standing. I slept well that night. That was my mistake. 3 days passed, quiet days. I worked the garden in the mornings, replaced the broken capstones on the border, the ones my father and I had laid in 1989, back when his hands were still steady enough to work a trowel. The petunias were recovering. Small green shoots pushing through the soil. Life coming back. I let myself believe Linda had talked to Brett. That the conversation had worked. That maybe I'd overreacted. Let Dottie's suspicion get into my head when it was just an accident after all. Then Thursday morning came, I was inside, washing breakfast dishes, when I heard it. That engine. The same aggressive rumble, the same deliberate rev. I dropped the plate into the sink, didn't even rinse it, and rushed to the window. Brett was backing out again, but this time he didn't hit the petunias. He hit the stone border. The truck lurched backward, tires mounting the old limestone blocks my father had hauled from a demolished church 40 miles away. I heard the crack from inside the house, sharp, final, like breaking bone. Two capstones split clean through. The truck bucked over them, tires crushing what my father's arthritic hands had placed with such care. I was out the door before I knew I was moving. Hey! Hey, stop! Brett kept going, straightened out onto the street, and only then did he pause. The window rolled down. Country music spilled out, something loud and twangy I didn't recognize. He leaned his arm on the door, looking back at me like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. Problem, old-timer. My chest was heaving. I pointed at the broken stones. You just drove over my border. You broke. Those stones have been there since... Huh. He looked past me, barely interested. Didn't feel anything. Linda came out then. Not rushing, not concerned. She walked to the edge of their porch in her white bathrobe, coffee cup steaming in the morning air. She looked at me, then at Brett, and her face was empty, no recognition, no apology, nothing. Actually, Frank, she said, and her voice was different now, cold, rehearsed. We've had the property surveyed. That border? It's 6 inches over the easement line. Technically, you're the one who's been trespassing. The ground shifted under me. Not physically, but something worse. What? She disappeared inside and came back with a manila envelope. Walked it over to the property line, stopping exactly there, like crossing would contaminate her, and held it out. I took it. My hands were shaking. Survey report, she said. And the original easement documentation from 1954. Brett's lawyer pulled it. That whole flower bed, Frank, not actually yours, never was. I opened the envelope. Official-looking papers, county seals, a map with red lines and measurements, numbers that didn't make sense, legal language I couldn't follow. But Linda's signature was at the bottom of one document. Her handwriting. That little loop on the L she'd had since high school when I used to pass her notes in study hall. Brett shifted his truck into park, got out, leaned against the door. He was 42, maybe 43. Gym-built shoulders, tight t-shirt, arms crossed like a man who'd never lost anything in his life. Better move those flowers, old-timer, before someone really gets hurt. He smiled. Not mean, exactly. Worse than mean. Amused, like I was entertainment. Wouldn't want any more accidents. The words stuck in my throat. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Linda turned back toward her house. Sorry, Frank, but property rights are property rights. She went inside. Brett got back in his truck and drove off, radio blaring, leaving me standing there with an envelope full of papers that said my father's work, my work, had been a 40-year trespass. I walked back to the broken border, knelt down. The capstones were split clean through, and when I lifted one piece, I saw it, carved on the underside, where he'd thought no one would ever look. J.M., 1989. Joseph Morrison. My father. His initials. His mark. Proof he'd been here, that he'd built something that mattered. I sat in the dirt, holding that broken stone, and for the first time in 5 years, maybe longer, I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears running down my face while the morning got brighter and the neighborhood woke up around me. Dottie's curtain was open now. She stood in her window, hand over her mouth. Across the street, I saw Pastor Ella slow her car as she drove past. She didn't stop. Nobody stopped. I was 68 years old, holding my father's broken legacy, and the woman I'd loved for 36 years had just signed paperwork to erase us both. The morning smelled like exhaust and honeysuckle. I couldn't tell which one was making me sick. I didn't sleep that night. Sat on the porch until 2 in the morning, that manila envelope on my lap, still unopened after the first glance. The papers felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel, like they carried weight beyond ink and legal terms I couldn't parse. The bullfrogs were loud from the creek. Endless chorus, mocking almost. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice, then quit. Dottie's kitchen light came on around 2:15. I wondered if she couldn't sleep either, or if this was just what happened when you got old. Sleep became a luxury, and the night stretched out long and lonely. My mother's trowel sat beside me on the porch rail. I'd brought it out without thinking, just needed something familiar in my hands. And the wood was smooth where 3 generations had worn it down. My grandmother's hands, my mother's, mine. Now Brett was claiming the ground we'd worked didn't even belong to us. I must have dozed off in the chair, because next thing I knew the sun was coming up and someone was knocking. Kyle stood on my porch. My grandson, 19, home from college, shoulders filling out, his mother's eyes but his grandfather's jaw. He had a shovel over his shoulder and 2 coffees in a carrier from the gas station. "Grandpa?" I blinked, rubbed my face. "Kyle, what are you—" "Mom called, told me about the border thing." He held out one of the coffees. "Figured you could use help replanting those flowers. Push 'em back from the line, you know. Avoid any more problems." I took the coffee. It was hot, too much sugar the way I used to make it for him when he'd visit as a kid. The gesture made my throat tight. "Your grandma know you're here?" "Don't care if she does." He set the other coffee down, tested the shovel's weight. "She said some things about you last night, about how you always played the victim, how you trapped her taking care of great-grandma." His jaw worked. "I remember great-grandma, though. I remember her teaching me to plant seeds, those spotted hands in the dirt, how patient she was." He looked at the broken border, then at me. "Mom made it sound like you forced Grandma to be a nurse. But I was there, Grandpa. I saw you doing most of it. The bedpans, the medicine, sitting up all night when great-grandma couldn't sleep. Grandma just complained." The words hit me sideways. 36 years of marriage, and I'd thought I was the only one who remembered. Thought maybe Linda's version was the truth, that I'd been blind, selfish, demanding. But Kyle had been watching. A little boy seeing things adults thought he couldn't understand. "She wasn't always like that," I said. "Your grandma, she used to be kind." "Maybe." Kyle stabbed the shovel into the ground near the rose bed. "But she's not now. And I'm not going to sit in her house listening to her trash talk you when I know it's bullshit." We worked together as the morning warmed up, dug up the roses carefully, roots wrapped in wet burlap, moved them 18 inches back from the property line, well clear of any easement dispute. Kyle worked steady, strong, didn't complain when the sun got hot or when thorns caught his arms. Around 10, Dottie came over with lemonade and a shoebox. "Been meaning to show you this, Frank." She set the box on the porch steps, glanced at Kyle. "Good to see you, young man." "Ma'am?" Kyle nodded, kept digging. Dottie opened the box. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them, time-stamped, dated, printed out clear as day. Brett's truck. The tire tracks through my petunias. The angles showing him grinning through the window. The broken capstones. Fresh cracks visible. "Started taking pictures after the first time," she said quietly. "Harold always said, document everything. The Army taught him that. Evidence matters." I stared at the photos. "Dottie? That survey they gave you. Something's off about it. My Raymond works in real estate development, and he mentioned Brett came to him months ago asking about property values, easements, how to leverage adjoining land." She tapped one photo. "This wasn't an accident, Frank. This was a plan." Kyle stopped digging, came over, looked at the photos, his face hardening. "We need to fight this," he said. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I was 68, living on a landscaper's pension, going up against a man with lawyers and money and a construction business that could bury me in paperwork. "I don't know if—" "We fight," Kyle said again. Firm, final. "Those roses mean something. Great-grandma's legacy means something." He looked at me. "You mean something, Grandpa." For the first time in days, I felt something other than tired. I felt like maybe I wasn't alone. But the envelope with its legal papers still sat on my porch table, and the question remained, what could an old man and a college kid really do against this? The hope lasted 3 days. Kyle went back to school Monday morning, promised to return on the weekend. Dottie's photos sat in the shoebox on my kitchen table. I'd looked through them a dozen times, trying to see what she saw, proof, evidence, something that would matter in a courtroom. But I wasn't a lawyer. I was a man who'd spent 40 years on his knees, planting other people's gardens. Tuesday afternoon, I drove to town. The county clerk's office was in the old courthouse. Marble floors, high ceilings, the smell of old paper and floor wax. I waited 20 minutes before Marjorie came to the counter. She'd gone to high school with me. 66 now, reading glasses on a chain, hair gone silver. Her son died in Iraq back in '05, and I'd helped her plant a memorial oak in the park. She remembered. Frank Morrison. She smiled, but it faded when she saw my face. What brings you in? I slid the manila envelope across the counter. Need help understanding this survey. Something doesn't feel right. She opened it. Read for a minute. Flipped pages, her expression shifting. Then she excused herself, disappeared into the back. When she returned, she had another folder. Old, yellowed at the edges. This is the original plat map from 1954. She spread it on the counter between us, spoke quietly. Your property line is right where you think it is, Frank. This survey Brett commissioned? She tapped the newer document. It's using a different reference point, claims the easement extends further than it does. It's creative. You mean it's wrong? I mean it's arguable. In court, with the right lawyer, Brett could make it stick, or you could fight it and win if you had money for a good attorney. She looked at me over her glasses. Do you? I didn't answer. We both knew. She slid a photocopy of the original plat map across the counter. Thought you should have this, just in case. I thanked her. Drove home with the papers on the passenger seat, feeling like I'd gained nothing. Sure, the original map showed I was right, but Brett had lawyers, money, time. What did I have? An old plat map and a shoebox of photos. That evening I heard voices next door. Loud. Linda and Brett arguing on their porch. Words I couldn't make out, but the tone was clear, sharp, bitter. A door slammed. Then silence. I almost felt sorry for Linda. Almost. Thursday morning brought the real blow. A certified letter. Official county seal. I signed for it standing in my bathrobe. Coffee going cold on the kitchen counter. Inside was a notice. Brett had filed a formal complaint about the property line dispute. A hearing was scheduled with the town council in 3 weeks. If I didn't appear with legal representation and proof of ownership, the council could rule in Brett's favor and grant him an injunction requiring me to remove all structures, including the stone border and garden beds, from the disputed easement, my father's stones, my mother's roses. 40 years of work, gone. I sat at the kitchen table, reading the notice 3 times. The words blurred. My hands shook, not from age, from rage, from helplessness. I could hire a lawyer, maybe, drain my savings, mortgage the house I'd owned free and clear since 1982, spend everything on a legal fight I might lose anyway, because men like Brett always seemed to win. They had the money, the connections, the system bent for them. Or I could give up, pull up the roses, move them further back, live with less. Swallow my pride, my father's legacy, my mother's memory. Just let it go. I looked out the window at the garden. The roses we'd replanted were struggling. Transplant shock, the leaves yellowing. Even flowers know when they've been uprooted. Across the street, Dottie was outside watering her tomatoes. She glanced over, saw me in the window, and her expression said everything. She knew. Somehow, she already knew. The certified letter sat on the table between me and my cold coffee. 3 weeks to figure out how to fight a man who had everything I didn't. 3 weeks to decide if dignity was worth losing everything else. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. Couldn't face the neighbors. Couldn't face Dottie's sympathetic looks or Pastor Ella's well-meaning questions at church. Just stayed inside, curtains half drawn, watching the garden through the window like it was already a memory. Saturday morning, Kyle called. Grandpa, you okay? You didn't answer yesterday. I'm fine. You're not fine. I can hear it. A pause. The council hearing? 3 weeks. My voice sounded flat, even to me. I don't have money for a lawyer, Kyle. And even if I did, then we represent ourselves. We have Dottie's photos. We have the original plat map. We have the truth. The truth. Like that mattered against Brett's expensive suit and prepared arguments. Kyle, I appreciate it, but Grandpa, his voice cracked a little. Great-grandma used to tell me stories about planting those roses, about how her mother carried the cuttings from Iowa in wet newspaper, how they almost died on the trip, but she kept them alive. 3 generations, Grandpa. You gonna let some asshole in a truck end that? I closed my eyes. I'm tired, son. I know, but you're not done. After we hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I got up, put on my boots, and went outside. The roses looked worse. More yellow leaves, some brown at the edges. Transplant shock was setting in hard. I knelt, knees cracking like always, and touched the soil, too dry. In my fugue, I'd forgotten to water them. I dragged the hose over, turned it on low, let the water soak in slow and deep, the way my mother had taught me. Don't drown them, Franklin. Let them drink steady. Everything worth keeping needs patience. While I worked, I noticed something. The stone border, even broken, still held its line. My father's craftsmanship. The remaining capstone sat square and level, moss-covered on the north side, weathered but solid. 40 years of seasons, and they hadn't budged. I found the piece with his initials, J.M., 1989. The stone had split, but the carving was intact. I traced the letters with my finger, felt the grooves his old trembling hands had made. Sorry, Dad, I said to nobody. To the air. To ghosts. I'm trying. I spent the morning working, not moving flowers, not retreating. So I'm just tending. Deadheading spent blooms, pulling weeds, spreading fresh mulch. The work settled something in me, made the world smaller, manageable. These were things I could control: soil, water, growth. The rest was noise. Dottie came over around noon with a sandwich wrapped in foil and a thermos of iced tea. You're out here, she said. Not a question. Seemed like time. She sat on the porch steps, watched me work. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, Raymond called me yesterday. My son. I looked up. He wants me to sell the house. Move into assisted living at Pleasant View. She said it like the words tasted bad. Says I'm getting too old to manage on my own. Says it's for my safety. She unwrapped the sandwich, handed it to me. Brett offered him 20% over market value. Wants to buy my place, expand his footprint on the street. The sandwich stuck in my throat. Dottie, I'm sorry. Don't be. I told Raymond no. Told him his father didn't fight at Porkchop Hill so some bully could buy me out. She smiled, but it was thin. He's angry. Says I'm being stubborn. Maybe I am. But Harold used to say the only thing worse than fighting a losing battle is not fighting at all. She stood, brushed off her pants. That shoebox of photos? It's yours. Use it however you need to. And Frank? She looked at me straight. You've lived quiet your whole life. Never caused trouble, never asked for much. But quiet doesn't mean weak. Don't forget that. She went back to her house, and I finished the sandwich sitting on the porch. The garden looked better already, just from water, just from attention. Small things, simple things. That night, I opened my mother's old Bible, the one she'd kept by her bed the last years when she couldn't sleep. Stuck in the pages of Psalms, I found it, a dried rose, pressed flat, brown with age, from my wedding day, 42 years ago. Linda's bouquet. My mother had saved it. I held it up to the light, fragile, nearly dust. But still here. The town council meeting was in 3 weeks. I didn't have a lawyer, didn't have money. But I had Dottie's photos, the original plat map Marjorie had copied, and Kyle's voice on the phone saying, "You're not done." Maybe that was enough. Or maybe I was fooling myself. Either way, I watered the roses again before bed, checked each plant, whispered to them like my mother used to. Hang on. Just hang on a little longer. The leaves were still yellow, but some new growth was pushing through at the base. Small victories. That's all you can ask for sometimes. The following Tuesday, I went to the hardware store for mulch. Needed something to do with my hands. Something to keep the panic at bay. 2 weeks until the council meeting, and every time I looked at those legal papers, my chest got tight. The store smelled like sawdust and motor oil. Familiar. Safe. I was loading bags into my cart when I heard his voice. Brett, over by the paint counter, talking loud enough for half the store to hear. Yeah, dealing with a neighbor situation, he was saying to the counter guy. Young kid, maybe 25, name tag said Derek. Old guy next door thinks his weeds matter more than property rights. Gonna have to teach him how things work in the real world. Derek laughed, nervous. That's rough, man. Not rough, just annoying. These old-timers, they don't get it. World moved on without them. Brett grabbed a paint can, hefted it. But hey, that's what lawyers are for, right? Make it official. I stood there frozen, half hidden behind a display of rakes. The counter guy glanced past Brett, saw me, and his face went red. He'd bought mulch from me for 3 years running. His mother had hired me to landscape her back patio. He looked away quick, said nothing. Brett paid and walked out whistling. Never saw me. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. I left my cart where it was and walked to my truck. Sat in the cab for 10 minutes, hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. The whole town was going to be like this, wasn't it? People I'd known for decades, watching from the sidelines while Brett steamrolled me, too polite to take sides, too uncomfortable to speak up. That evening, Pastor Ella stopped by. She runs the Methodist church I've attended for 40 years, 58, kind eyes, the sort of person who actually listens when you talk. Frank, I heard about the council meeting. She stood on my porch, holding a covered dish. Casserole, probably. That's what church ladies do when life goes sideways. Wanted to check on you. I'm managing. Are you? She set the dish down, sat in the other porch chair without asking. Because the prayer circle's been talking. There's opinions. Let me guess. Half think I should back down, keep the peace. Other half don't want to get involved. She didn't deny it. Small towns are complicated. People like Brett, they have money, influence. They make people nervous. She looked at the garden. But that doesn't make them right. Doesn't make me right either, apparently. Frank, she leaned forward. I can't take sides publicly. You understand that. The church serves everyone, even people we don't particularly like, but privately? She pulled something from her purse, a folded paper. This week's bulletin has a prayer request. For neighbors in conflict, that cooler heads prevail and property rights be respected. I submitted it myself. I took the paper, read it. Such small words for such a big gesture. Thank you. Some gardens are worth fighting for. She stood, touched my shoulder. See you Sunday. After she left, I sat with that bulletin in my lap until the sun went down. The prayer request meant everyone at church would know. The whole congregation talking about it, choosing sides or trying not to. My private shame made public. But maybe that was the point. Maybe silence had protected me for too long. Let men like Brett think they could do whatever they wanted because old guys like me would just take it. Sunday came. I almost didn't go to church, couldn't face it. But I got dressed, drove over, sat in my usual pew, third row left, same spot for 40 years. Pastor Ella read the prayer requests. When she got to mine, the sanctuary went quiet. People shifted in their seats. I felt eyes on the back of my neck. Somewhere behind me, I heard Linda's sharp intake of breath. After the service, people were different. Some avoided me, made excuses to hurry to their cars. But others stopped. Old Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand. Your mother's garden was the prettiest on the block. Still is. Tom Hendricks, who ran the feed store, said, Need anything, Frank? You call? Even young Derek from the hardware store mumbled an apology on his way out. Linda and Brett didn't stay for coffee hour. I watched them leave early, Brett's jaw tight, Linda walking 2 steps behind him like she was being pulled. That afternoon, Dottie came over with news. Raymond called again. She settled into the porch chair, breathing hard. Her color wasn't good. He's coming down this weekend. Says we need to talk seriously about my living situation. She made air quotes, bitter. Brett's been pressuring him, raised his offer, 25% over market now. Dottie, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. But Raymond's struggling, Frank. His business isn't doing well. His marriage is rocky. This money would solve a lot of problems for him. She looked at her house, the one Harold built, the one they'd raised Raymond in. Part of me wonders if I'm being selfish, holding on to the past while my son's future falls apart. It's not selfish to keep your home, isn't it? She stood, gripped the porch rail. Brett's offering Raymond a solution. I'm offering him, what? Stubbornness? Pride? She left before I could answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, adding up the costs. Dottie might lose her house defending me. Kyle was missing classes to come fight my battles. The church was divided. Even if I won at the council meeting, what would it cost everyone around me? Maybe Brett was right. Maybe I was just an old man clinging to weeds. The clock read 2:47 a.m. when I made a decision. I didn't tell anyone what it was, but I got up, went to the kitchen, and started writing. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. Sealed envelope, addressed to Brett Holloway. Inside, 2 sentences. You win. I'll remove the garden from the disputed easement. Surrender. Clean. Simple. End it before the council meeting, before Dottie lost her house, before Kyle wasted more time on a fight that would bankrupt us all. I was 68. How many years did I have left anyway? Why drag everyone down with me? I didn't mail it. Kept finding reasons not to. Tuesday, mailbox too far. Wednesday, forgot stamps. Thursday, rain. Friday morning, Kyle showed up unannounced. Drove 4 hours from school, walked in like he owned the place, saw the letter on the table. What's this? Nothing. He picked it up, read the address. His face went hard. You're quitting. I'm being practical. Bullshit. He threw the letter down. This is what Mom does. Gives up when things get hard, blames everyone else later. I thought you were different. The words stung because they were true. Kyle, I can't ask you and Dottie to sacrifice. You didn't ask. We chose. He sat down hard in the chair across from me. You know what I figured out. Mom didn't leave because you were bad to her. She left because you were good to everyone but her. Great-grandma, the neighbors, your work. You gave everything away until there was nothing left for your wife. I stared at him. She was wrong to cheat, wrong to be cruel. But you were wrong too, Grandpa. You taught me to take care of everyone except yourself. His voice cracked. Don't do it again. Don't give Brett what he wants, because you think it'll make life easier for everyone else. He left, drove back to school that same afternoon, didn't say goodbye. I burned the letter that evening, watched it curl and blacken in the kitchen sink, ran water over the ashes until nothing remained. Kyle was right. I'd spent 40 years being accommodating, peaceful, quiet, swallowed every insult, ignored every slight, made myself small so others could be comfortable. And where had it gotten me? Divorced, alone, about to lose the one thing that connected me to my parents. No more. Saturday morning, I called the county clerk's office, asked Marjorie about the council meeting procedure, what I needed to bring, how it worked. She walked me through it patiently, told me I had 3 minutes to present my case, 3 minutes to defend 40 years. Sunday after church, I asked Pastor Ella if I could borrow the parish hall Tuesday night. Need to practice something, I said. She handed me the key, no questions asked. I stood at that podium for 2 hours, papers spread out, practicing my speech. My voice shook at first, then steadied. By the end, I could say it without looking down. My name is Franklin Morrison. I've lived in this house for 40 years, and I'm here to defend my family's legacy. Simple words, but saying them out loud, in that empty hall with sunlight coming through the stained glass, felt like something breaking open inside me. The council meeting was in 6 days. I wasn't ready, but I was done surrendering. The Grange Hall smelled like old wood and burnt coffee. Folding chairs squeaked as people settled in, more people than I'd expected. Half the town, it looked like. The council sat at a long table up front. Mayor Perkins, 3 council members, the town clerk with her laptop, American flag in the corner, portraits of past mayors watching from the walls. I sat in the 3rd row with Dottie on my left, Kyle on my right. My hands were sweating. The manila folder in my lap, Dottie's photos, the original plat map, my father's stone fragment wrapped in cloth, felt impossibly heavy. Brett sat across the aisle with Linda and a lawyer in a sharp suit. The lawyer had a briefcase, expensive shoes, the kind of confidence that comes from never losing. Brett wore a tie, hair combed, looking respectable. Linda stared straight ahead, wouldn't meet my eyes. Mayor Perkins called the meeting to order, read through some routine business, street repairs, budget approvals, then, next item, property line dispute, Morrison versus Holloway. Mr. Holloway, you filed the complaint. You have 3 minutes. The lawyer stood, clicked open his briefcase, pulled out presentation boards with maps and survey data, spoke in smooth, measured tones about easements, historical boundaries, legal precedents, made it sound so reasonable. The old survey was flawed. Modern technology revealed the truth. Mr. Morrison's improvements had been constructed in good faith but were nevertheless encroaching on established right-of-way. We're not seeking punitive damages, the lawyer finished. We simply ask that the council enforce existing property law and require Mr. Morrison to relocate his landscaping features to the correct boundary line. He sat down. Brett nodded, satisfied. Linda's hands twisted in her lap. Mayor Perkins looked at me. Mr. Morrison, you have 3 minutes to respond. I stood. My knees shook. The folder nearly slipped from my hands. Kyle whispered, "You got this, Grandpa." I walked to the front, set my materials on the podium, looked out at all those faces, neighbors I'd known for decades, watching to see if I'd fold. My name is Franklin Morrison. I'm 68 years old. I've lived at 412 Maple Street for 40 years. Before that, my parents lived there. My father and mother bought that land in 1954, built that house with their own hands. My voice came out stronger than I expected. The stone border Mr. Holloway's truck destroyed, my father placed those stones in 1989. He carved his initials on one J.M., Joseph Morrison. I unwrapped the cloth, held up the broken stone fragment, the initials visible to everyone. This isn't about property lines or easements. This is about a man deliberately destroying something that took 3 generations to build. I set down the stone, pulled out Dottie's photos. These are time-stamped photographs showing Mr. Holloway's vehicle intentionally driving through my garden. Not once, multiple times, always when I was outside to see it. I spread the photos across the podium. The room was silent. The lawyer says the old survey was flawed. This is the original 1954 plat map from the county records. I unfolded Marjorie's copy. It shows my property line exactly where my father placed those stones. Exactly where my mother planted her roses. Mr. Holloway's survey uses a different reference point, one that conveniently gives him 18 inches of my land. Mayor Perkins leaned forward, studying the map. I'm not a lawyer, I continued. I'm a landscaper. Was a landscaper. Retired now. I spent 40 years on my knees, planting other people's gardens, making their yards beautiful. Never asked for much, never caused trouble. Just wanted to tend the one piece of ground my parents left me. My voice cracked. I steadied it. My mother brought rose cuttings from Iowa in 1954, her mother's roses. They almost died on the trip, but she kept them alive, planted them in that garden, tended them through droughts and floods and every hard season. When she got too sick to work them herself, I took over. When I thought I might lose them, my grandson, I gestured to Kyle, came home from college to help me save them. Kyle's eyes were wet. Those roses have survived 70 years, 3 generations. They've outlasted wars and recessions and everything else this world threw at us. And now Mr. Holloway wants me to dig them up because his lawyer found a loophole in a survey? I looked directly at Brett. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I've lived quiet my whole life, never asked for much, but those flowers are my mother's legacy, my father's legacy, and I'm not moving them for a man who measures his worth in truck payments and property grabs. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone, maybe half. But it was loud, sustained. People stood, Mrs. Patterson, Tom Hendricks, even young Derek from the hardware store. Brett's face went red. Linda was crying silently. Mayor Perkins banged his gavel. Order! Order, please! He looked at the other council members, had a whispered conversation. Then, Mr. Holloway, can you provide documentation for the reference points used in your survey? The lawyer fumbled. It's standard methodology. The reference points, Perkins repeated. Specific documentation. We'd need to request that from the surveying company. Then this matter is tabled pending verification. Perkins looked at me. Mr. Morrison, the council will review both surveys against county records. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks with a ruling. Until then, both parties will maintain the status quo. No further alterations to the disputed area. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss. Brett stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispered urgently. Brett shook him off, stalked out. Linda followed, but at the door she turned back. For just a second, our eyes met. She looked like she wanted to say something. Then she was gone. Outside, people surrounded me, shook my hand, clapped my shoulder. Dottie hugged me hard. Harold would be proud, she whispered. Kyle just grinned. Told you. The night air smelled like autumn coming. The parking lot emptied slowly, people still talking, still processing. I saw Raymond Chen approach Dottie, and they walked to the edge of the lot together, heads close. I didn't know what would happen in 2 weeks, but standing there with my grandson beside me, Dottie's photos in my folder and my father's stone in my pocket, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I mattered. The call came 8 days later. Mayor Perkins, his voice formal but not unkind. Mr. Morrison, the council's reached a decision. We'd like you to come in tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, both parties present. I barely slept. Kyle drove down that night, slept on the couch. We didn't talk much, just sat on the porch drinking coffee, watching the garden in the dark. The roses had recovered, new growth pushing through, leaves green again, stubborn things, like the women who'd planted them. Morning came cold and clear, October settling in, the air smelling like wood smoke and dying leaves. The mayor's office was smaller than I'd expected. Just him and the town clerk, a desk piled with folders. Brett and his lawyer were already there, standing by the window. Linda wasn't with them. Gentlemen, please sit. Perkins gestured to the chairs. His face gave nothing away. We sat. Brett's jaw was tight. His lawyer had a legal pad, pen ready. The council reviewed both surveys against the original 1954 plat map and the county's complete historical records. Perkins opened a folder. Mr. Holloway, your survey used reference points from a 1987 road expansion project, reference points that were later found to be incorrectly placed. The surveying company has since acknowledged the error in their methodology. Brett's lawyer started to speak. Perkins held up a hand. The original property line, as established in 1954 and confirmed by the county surveyor's office, places Mr. Morrison's stone border and garden beds entirely within his legal property boundary. There is no easement violation. The words took a moment to land, then they hit like thunder. Furthermore, Perkins continued, Mrs. Chen's photographic evidence shows a pattern of deliberate property damage. The council is issuing a restraining order prohibiting vehicles from Mr. Holloway's property from coming within 10 feet of Mr. Morrison's boundary line. Violation will result in fines and potential criminal charges. Brett exploded. This is bullshit. That old man's been squatting on Mr. Holloway. Perkins's voice went cold. You commissioned a fraudulent survey to justify a land grab. We could pursue charges for that alone. I suggest you accept this ruling quietly. The lawyer put a hand on Brett's arm, whispered urgently. Brett shook him off, stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This whole town's a goddamn joke, protecting some old fool's weeds while real development gets blocked. He jabbed a finger at me. You think you won? You're gonna die alone in that house, old man, and nobody's gonna remember you or your dead mother's flowers. He stormed out. The lawyer gathered his papers, apologized quietly, and followed. The room was silent. Perkins handed me a document. Official ruling. Your property line is confirmed. The restraining order is active immediately. I'm sorry it came to this, Frank. Thank you. My hands were shaking taking the paper. Thank you. Outside, Kyle was waiting on the courthouse steps. I showed him the document. He read it, then grabbed me in a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. We did it, Grandpa. We actually did it. You did it, I said. You and Dottie and everyone who stood up when I couldn't. We drove home. The garden looked different somehow. Same roses, same stones, but transformed by the knowledge that they were safe now, legal, protected. Dottie was in her yard, and when she saw my face, she knew. She walked over, slowly. She'd been moving slower lately, I noticed, and I told her, "Well," she said, and her eyes were bright. "Harold always said the righteous will outlast the wicked. Took a while, but he was right. How's Raymond?" Her smile faltered. "He's processing, disappointed about the money. But after the council meeting, after seeing me stand up, he said something. Said he'd forgotten I was a fighter. That maybe I wasn't as fragile as he thought." She touched my arm. "We're having dinner next week. Really talking." First time in years. Over the next week, small things happened. Big things disguised as small. Linda's moving truck showed up on a Tuesday. I watched from my porch as they loaded her belongings. She came out carrying a small box, last load maybe, and saw me. We looked at each other across 40 feet of grass and 42 years of history. She set the box down, walked to the property line, stopped there, like crossing would break her. "Frank," her voice was hoarse. "I—" She stopped, started again. "The roses, they were always beautiful. I'm sorry I forgot that. I'm sorry I forgot a lot of things." I didn't have words. After everything, I still didn't have words. "I'm moving back to Ohio," she said. "My sister's there. I needed you to know I'm sorry." She walked back to the truck, drove away. I never saw her again. Brett's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. Foreclosure, I heard through the church gossip line. His business had been leveraged too high, and when a big contract fell through, everything collapsed. The house sold to a young couple with a baby. Nice people. They waved when they saw me in the garden. Kyle started coming home every Sunday. We'd work the soil together, not talking much, just the comfortable silence of hands in dirt. He brought a girl once, shy, studying biology, asked intelligent questions about the roses. I liked her. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, we planted new bulbs, tulips, daffodils, crocuses, spring flowers, my mother had called them. Hope flowers. "Why plant them now?" Kyle asked. "Won't see them for months." "That's the point," I said. "You plant them in the dark, in the cold, trusting they'll come up when it's time. That's what faith is, I guess. Doing the work even when you can't see the result." He thought about that, kept digging. "Grandpa, that thing you said at the council meeting, about living quiet your whole life." He paused. "I'm glad you stopped being quiet, even if just that once." I looked at the garden, my mother's roses blooming late, the stone border holding firm, my father's initials still carved underneath despite the break. 3 generations of work, almost lost, now saved, not by being loud, not by being aggressive, by being willing finally to stand up and say, "This matters. I matter." "Me too, son," I said. "Me too." We finished planting as the sun dropped. The bulbs were small, almost nothing, but come spring, they'd break through the earth and the garden would be full of color again. Some things just need time, and patience, and people willing to tend them. Winter came, and the garden slept. I took to sitting on the porch most mornings, even when it was cold enough to see my breath. Coffee in my hands, that same old percolator still working after all these years, watching the sun come up over the houses. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the way it used to be. The roses had gone dormant, just bare canes and mulch now, but underneath I knew the roots were holding, getting stronger. That's what winter does. It looks like death, but really it's just rest, gathering strength for what comes next. Dottie and I had Thanksgiving together. Kyle came home, brought that girl, Sarah her name was. We cooked a small turkey, nothing fancy, but it was enough. Raymond stopped by with his wife, stayed for pie. Awkward at first, then easier. Families are like gardens, I guess. Sometimes they need tending after neglect. Sometimes they come back. I thought about Linda sometimes. Wondered if she was happy in Ohio, if she'd found whatever she'd been looking for when she left. I didn't hate her. Maybe I should have, but I was too tired for hate, too old. She'd been drowning and grabbed onto the wrong lifeline. We all make mistakes when we're scared. Even Brett, I didn't waste much energy on him anymore. He was gone. The young couple with the baby kept their yard nice, always waved. That was enough. The bulbs Kyle and I planted were down there in the frozen ground, waiting. Come March, maybe April, they'd push through. Yellow daffodils, red tulips, purple crocuses. My mother would have liked that. She always said spring flowers were God's way of reminding us that nothing stays dead forever. I learned something these past months. Took me 68 years, but I finally learned it. Silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a polite mask. There's a time to bend, and there's a time to stand. The trick is knowing which is which. My father knew. He carved his initials in stone, marked his presence, said I was here, I built this. My mother knew. She kept those roses alive through every hard season, passed them down like a promise. And now Kyle knows. I see it in the way he works the soil, careful but confident. He's learning what it means to tend something bigger than yourself. That's the legacy, I think. Not the flowers themselves, but the lesson they teach. Some things are worth fighting for. Some ground is worth defending. Not because it makes you rich or famous or powerful, but because it connects you to the people who came before and the people who will come after. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's just showing up day after day, doing the work, caring for what matters even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. I took another sip of coffee. The sun was full up now, the sky that winter pale blue that makes everything look clean and new. Across the street, Dottie came out to get her newspaper. She waved. I waved back. My father's broken stone sits on the porch rail now. I glued it back together, not perfect, but whole again. The crack is still visible, the initials still clear. JM, 1989. Sometimes broken things can be mended. They carry their scars, but they hold. Come spring, when those bulbs break through and the roses wake up, Kyle and I will be here, tending, watering, doing the quiet work that nobody notices until it blooms. That's all any of us can do, really. Plant something good, protect it when it's threatened, pass it on when it's time. And maybe, if we're lucky, someone will remember our hands in the soil long after we're gone. I finished my coffee. The morning was cold, but inside I felt warm. Some gardens are worth fighting for, some legacies are worth keeping. And some old men, even at 68, still have strength enough to stand.